It is impossible to talk about Victory motorcycles without mentioning Harley-Davidson. Harley is the elephant in the room whenever cruisers come up. You can try to ignore them, but one small shift and they'll crush you. And so the story of Victory motorcycles starts with the meteoric ascent of Harley-Davidson in the 90s, as the motor company hit a wave and surfed it all the way until the subprime mortgage crisis of 2008. The boomers hit their peak earning and spending years, a certain future governor decided to put some miles on a fat boy, and all of a sudden, big American V-twin cruisers were all the rage, and every dentist and accountant was hitting the road on the weekend trying hard to look like a one-percenter. Leather chaps were selling out everywhere, and that was long before pride parades were even a thing. If you wanted to buy a new Harley-Davidson, good luck to you. The waiting lists went up to a year. Of course, the Japanese manufacturers saw opportunity here. If they could produce motorcycles that looked like Harleys but were less expensive and more reliable, then maybe they could make themselves a pretty penny cashing in on the trend. And so Suzuki Intruders, Honda Shadows, Kawasaki Vulcans, and Yamaha Stars hit the dealerships, but none of them made much of a dent in Harley sales. Yamaha even built the Roadstar, a Yamaha Harley with 100 cubic inches and pushrods, which was bigger and more imposing than any Road King back in the day. It sounded like a Harley and felt even more sluggish and heavier than one too. These Japanese bikes were great motorcycles, in many ways superior to what Harley-Davidson was offering. I owned a Suzuki Intruder 1400 which had shaft drive, an enormously tall overhead cam engine and chopper styling. Had a lot of good times on that bike, but it wasn't American and it wasn't a Harley, and therefore would never be an option for a certain demographic. Harley-Davidsons, as expensive and outdated as they were, became an aspirational brand, and buyers who wanted an authentic American cruiser just didn't have any other choice. Until Victory came along. So let's look at this brand, its birth, dynamic history, and ultimate demise, and see what lessons and conclusions can be drawn about the psychology of motorcyclists and the business of selling American cruisers. Also, only about 9% of the viewers of my channel are subscribed, so if you enjoy the content, please consider smashing that red button, hitting the bell, and liking the video. It prompts the YouTube algorithm to suggest my videos to a wider audience and helps the channel tremendously. Let's talk about Victory. Polaris Incorporated is an American company that produces ATVs, snowmobiles, neighborhood electric vehicles, and used to produce watercraft as well. They have built vehicles for police, paramedics, firefighters, and the military, and have many decades worth of experience building engines and machines that are both reliable and competitive on the world stage. With thousands of employees and billions of dollars in sales, Polaris is several times the size of Harley-Davidson, and definitely has the engineering and manufacturing know-how to produce its own line of motorcycles. And what better time to build an American motorcycle than the 90s, when demand was skyrocketing and Harley-Davidson was either unwilling or unable to ratchet up production to meet it. So finally, after a few years of intensive R&D, in the year 1998, the V92C hit the market. An American V-twin cruiser with the largest production motorcycle engine in the world at the time, 1510cc. Everything on this motorcycle was built in the United States except for the Italian Brembo brakes and the British fuel injection system. The air oil-cooled Victory engine had a 5-speed transmission, a 6th gear was added later, single overhead cam, hydraulic lifters, and incorporated many innovative ideas that made it easily serviceable and tunable. Victory would continue the displacement wars, coming out with 100 and 106 cubic inch engines and pushing their cruiser rivals to try to match their power and torque. The 106 or 1740cc motor eventually ended up turning out 97 horsepower and 113 pound-feet of torque by 2012, and was definitely a step above what Harley was producing at the time. While the V92 bikes were an impressive first effort, it wasn't until the Vegas came out that the company hit its stride. The bike targeted the Dyna Wide Glide and was a serious attempt at a factory custom. It was a stock motorcycle that looked like it had just come out of a custom shop, and it was very impressive. Victory kept rolling with other hot customs such as the Kingpin, the Hammer, a muscle cruiser, and the super slick Jackpot. Later came the Highbow, the Judge, and my personal favorite, the Bobber-inspired Gunner. And all of these cruisers were at or near the top of the class when it came to performance. In addition to custom cruisers, Victory also challenged the Harley baggers and dressers with their own long-distance touring bikes. The most outlandish of these was the Victory Vision, an Art Deco mountain of a motorcycle that looked like it belonged in an episode of the Jetsons, and had more cargo capacity than some small cars. After the Vision came the Crossroads and the Cross Country, two performance-oriented touring bikes that were clearly aimed at the Harley touring line. As with the smaller cruisers, these were marketed as performance bikes, and Victory went to great lengths to point out that they were faster and better handling than their Harley counterparts. Now, if you think that the Harley-Davidson Livewire was the first electric motorcycle brought to the market by a major motorcycle manufacturer, you can be forgiven. I thought so too. However, Victory beat Harley to the punch by a cool 3 years by purchasing and releasing the Empulse from Bramall. They even raced the bike in the Isle of Man TT and at Pikes Peak, taking the class win at Pikes and a second on the island. In effect, Victory had a viable electric performance bike long before the Livewire hit the road. In addition, Victory also raced and won another Pikes Peak class with a Scout-based sport bike, competed and won in NHRA drag races, and set a land speed record in their class at the Bonneville Salt Flats. Clearly, the company was focused on innovation and performance, as was illustrated by the last model they released, the Victory Octane. The Octane is often described as Victory's version of the Indian Scout, but that is far from true. In fact, the Scout and the Octane only share 35% of their parts, and the Octane was the faster, more aggressive, and more powerful of the two. This liquid-cooled muscle cruiser put out 104 horsepower and was definitely aimed at a younger demographic that valued sporty performance. Unfortunately, just as the Octane was coming out, Polaris announced that they would wind down the Victory motorcycle division and focus on Indian as their only motorcycle brand. Now, Polaris does not publish their motorcycle sales figures, and so they never revealed how many Victories they actually sold, but they did indicate that Victory had lost money 3 of its last 5 years. The closest we ever got to learning the sales figures was a statement by Steve Monetto, Vice President of Motorcycles for Polaris, in which he revealed that the best sales year for Victory was 2012, when they sold between 10,000 and 15,000 motorcycles. These numbers are low, considering that by 2012 Victory had been around for 14 years. For context, in 2012 Harley-Davidson sold nearly 250,000 bikes, and in 2006, at their peak, they sold 350,000. These numbers indicate that after more than a decade of existence, Victory was selling 1/20th the number of motorcycles that their big American competitor was moving. Now, at this point, I feel the need to point out one more fact. In 2015, Consumer Reports commissioned an extensive study on the reliability and owner satisfaction of various brands of motorcycle. Unsurprisingly, the big 4 Japanese brands were on top in reliability. But look at number 5 and how close it is to number 4. Victory's innovative approach not only made their bikes perform, it made them last. And when it came to owner satisfaction, Victory blew its competitors out of the water. So you had a brand that was unabashedly American, innovative, successful in racing, had reliability almost on par with the Big 4, and had the highest owner satisfaction rating in the world. And yet it didn't sell enough bikes even in the United States to make it worthwhile to keep around. In January of 2017, Polaris dropped a bombshell and announced that it would wind down operations of Victory motorcycles due to poor sales. Why? Perhaps we'll never know the full story, but there were several contributing factors. One was the decline in popularity of big cruisers. The boom that began in the early 90s hit a very hard wall in 2008 when the economy crashed due to the subprime mortgage crisis. Big, expensive American cruisers are a luxury item that fewer people buy in times of economic uncertainty. Cruisers are also a style of motorcycle that is predominantly enjoyed by the older generation, and by the time the recession passed and the economy started to tick up, many of those riders had already purchased their last bike and retired. Seniors on a fixed income became increasingly less likely to trade their bikes in for newer, ever more expensive ones, especially when they are riding cruisers. The look and performance of these motorcycles does not improve sufficiently from year to year and decade to decade to justify having to upgrade. The final nail in the coffin was the gas tank. It didn't have Harley-Davidson or Indian stamped on the side, and in a motorcycle segment in which heritage and nostalgia carry the day, that was perhaps the most unforgivable transgression. It's hard to compete with a company that has over 100 years of history. In fact, the only way you can is with another company that has the same. In 2011, Polaris purchased the Indian brand and started producing Indians alongside Victories. Presumably, the Indians sold better because when it came time to cut losses and run, Polaris kept Indian and discarded Victory. They promised to continue to provide parts and service for 10 years after the division folded, so they didn't leave the owners in a complete lurch, but many riders were left deeply resentful and feeling betrayed. After 2017, Indian became much more innovative and introduced such high-performance liquid-cooled bikes as the FTR 1200 and the Challenger. Perhaps some of that Victory spirit rubbed off. Indian owners also hope that Victory's reliability figures rubbed off as well, although as of the publication of this video, exact figures on Indian's reliability are unavailable. And so the dealers sold off their stock and will continue to service the bikes until 2027. And many of Victory is posted on the used market for bargain basement prices. It's hard to commit to a bike if you're not sure you'll find parts for it in the future. So ends the saga of one of the best motorcycle brands. Perhaps a little of Victory still lives on every time an Indian rolls by. Polaris still has the rights to the Empulse. Could we see an updated one with Indian stamped on the, well, not tank, but somewhere? Perhaps. What do you think of the whole sordid affair? Did you own a Victory or aspire to? Would you buy one now or buy an Indian? Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments and enjoy your spring riding. Oh, and I'm getting a Stage 1 upgrade installed on my Sportster Roadster, so stay tuned for a video on that soon. If you're interested in any of the gear that Brooke and I wear or use, or the camera equipment we use to film this channel, the links are below. Everything listed there was bought with our own money and we are not sponsored by any company. However, the links below are affiliate links and the channel is paid a small amount for referring you to shop at no additional cost to you. We do not recommend any products that we are not satisfied with ourselves, but we do strongly urge you to do your research and select the correct size for items like helmets and clothing. As always, thanks for watching, your support is greatly appreciated. Please hit that subscribe button, give the video a thumbs up, and leave a comment below. And whatever you ride, enjoy it. Wave at other bikers no matter what they're riding. We're all part of a brotherhood and sisterhood. Keep the rubber side down, shiny side up, and may the spokes be with you.